Hi, and welcome to Digital Defense. This is a weekly cybersecurity show broadcasting to you live from Bloomberg News, Washington, D.C. Bureau. My name is Jordan Robertson. I cover cybersecurity for Bloomberg, and as we do every week, I want to dive into some subjects both that you guys are interested in, so please feel free to type in any comments in the comment section, any questions, and we'll be able to answer them here, as well as talk about kind of news of the week and news you can use, really, when it comes to cybersecurity and how concerned or not you should be about specific cybersecurity topics. So as I mentioned, this is an audience-driven show, so any questions you have, please feel free to type them in the comment section or tweet to us at Technology. That's Bloomberg Technology's Twitter page, and we will get to as many questions as we can there. So the theme that I want to talk about today is what happens if you lose your cell phone. I mean, cell phones are the lifeblood, of our digital lives for many of us, and it's a pretty vexing question. It's a pretty scary thing. If you lose your phone, all the photos and videos and contacts that you have on them, those are potentially exposed to anybody who finds it. So I want to walk you through some ideas about what you can do to protect your phone, and also what you can do if you've actually lost your phone. What are your options that are available to you? So first, we'll start with this. So the screen I'm showing you, this is actually an ad for one of Google's services. Google has an app called Google Protect, which is it's an application you can download. It scans the applications on your device and it searches for malicious activity. But you don't actually have to do that. So I want to start with the basics. If you've got an Android phone, the good news is if you have registered your Google account with that device, you've logged in, which they all make you do when you get them, there is a feature that's turned on by default called Google Device Manager. Now, most people won't know that this is actually available on their device. I actually didn't until very recently. But if you go into your settings, go to the settings menu and then click on Device Administrators. For most phones, every Google phone, every Android phone is going to be different. But under Administrators, you should see a screen that says Device Manager, Android Device Manager. Now what that does, it's a really cool thing. Smartphones didn't used to be this way. But what that allows you to do, and again, Android's the most popular mobile OS on the planet, is it allows you to log into your Gmail account, to log into your Google account via a laptop or another phone, and erase data from your device that way. So it's this, in the tech industry, they call it mobile device management. They're very just lightweight apps that reside on your phone that give you remote administrative privileges. And in this case, what Google has done is it's made it an option that's, again, on by default, on your Android devices. So again, if you lose your Android phone and you've signed in your account to that phone, which again, most of us will do because the devices force you to, then you have an option via your Google account to remotely erase data from that device. It's impossible to overstate how convenient this is. There are some privacy and security folks who might raise eyebrows about the fact that, you have this remote management capability that's always on when it comes to your device. So there are risks there that I'll walk you through in a minute. But in terms of just sheer convenience for the vast majority of us, having this ability to remotely erase all the data on your device if you lose it is incredible. That's essential, and it's such an easy thing for these companies to do. Again, this is not a complicated task, but Google again makes that on by default. If you have an iPhone, you also have some really good options, but you got to work a little bit more for it. So if you have an iPhone, you're going to want to turn on this feature. This feature is called Find My Phone. You've got to go into your iCloud settings, which you can see here. And Apple, unlike Google, does not turn this feature on by default. So you have to actively go in, if you've got an iPhone, go into your iCloud settings, turn on Find My Phone. And if you do that, you actually get a range of tools that are available to you, that are in some ways more robust than what Google offers. Anybody who's familiar with this, this topic knows that what you can do with this feature is, you can identify where your phone is, you can locate it, you can either erase the data or lock the phone in the event that you're hopeful that you'll be able to recover it, so you don't just have to nuke the phone. In other words, so Apple gives you a lot of really good tools to manage your phone if you've lost it. But again, you've got to turn it on. You got to turn it on first, otherwise you're not going to get that protection. So we're getting some questions here, and really glad about that. Again, anybody who's watching this, we're broadcasting live on Facebook and on Periscope. Please feel free to type your questions into the comment section. We're going to get to as many of those as we can, or tweet to us at Technology. And we'll try to get as many questions answered there. So the first question here is, my phone was stolen while traveling in a foreign country. What should I have done first? Okay, so this is what I think one of the big value adds of a show like this is lots of security experts will tell you what you should have done before you lost your phone, but that's not what I'm here to do. If you've lost your phone, and let's just assume the worst. Let's assume the worst case, you've lost the phone, there's no passcode on it, you haven't turned on the Find My iPhone feature if you're an iPhone user, and let's say for some reason you've disabled the Android device manager feature in Google, or you haven't logged into your Google account on that phone. Let's just assume that the phone is completely out there naked, and you have very few ways to access it. You still do have some ways to protect that device. Now, you're not going to get the photos back. You're not going to get the contacts back that are on that phone. However, if you had signed into any of these cloud services, like Verizon offers one, AT&T offers it, obviously Apple with their iCloud, they offer it, a lot of that data is going to be backed up automatically, and many people do this. Again, that's a proactive step you will need to have taken. But if you're in this situation, the first thing you got to do is call the phone company. Call the phone company so they could disable the phone. So you're not going to incur any extra charges. And most importantly, the phone company can disable your SIM card. So they disable the connection to your SIM card, so nobody can use that phone for anything. And most criminals are not interested in your personal photos. They're not interested in your personal contacts. They're not even interested in access to your email account. They're interested in selling that device. So what most criminals are going to do is they're going to find your phone, they're going to erase all the data on it, and they're going to go sell it into the black market. That's what, in general, is what happens. So it's going to be painful to lose that data. However, you don't need to worry necessarily that somebody's rifling through your personal information, because that's just not what most criminals do. In terms of what you should have done first before this happened, I think is a really important question. So if you are concerned about what would happen if my phone is lost or stolen, the first thing you need to do is just put a passcode on it. That's kind of the most important thing, just to prevent anybody from accessing that data. But I am a big fan of these Find My Phone features. Again, I cover cybersecurity. I know all the hacking risks. I know the privacy risks. You are giving these companies, Google and Apple, and potentially the device makers, access to your device. However, what's more important? If you've got a year's worth of photos on there that you want recovered, having that ability is really important. So, again, with Apple, if you're logged into your iCloud and backing up your photos, that's just a really easy kind of no-brainer way to ensure that even if your phone is lost, you still have access to that data. And if you're on an Android device, most of the big carriers will offer some sort of cloud service. Again, Verizon and AT&T. You've got to download a specialized app and then give it permission to upload all of your photos and contacts and things like that to the cloud. But it's a pretty good security mechanism. It's a pretty good safety mechanism, rather. And I would strongly encourage people to do both of those things. But again, one of the big messages is if you have an Android phone and you've logged into your Gmail account or your Google account, you have this mobile erase data on by default. And that's a big deal. Next question here, is backing up on the cloud the only way to save your data? It's not the only way, but it's the easiest way. And again, whether you're using iCloud or whether you're using Android's services, having a cloud backup is just by far the simplest, way to do it. It's not the most secure because, again, if somebody accesses your cloud account, they can, from a cybersecurity perspective, they can then access your photos and your contacts and things like that. So, if you're in what you might consider a sensitive class of consumer, if you're a business executive, if you're a journalist or a human rights activist, or you have reason to believe that you would be the target of a hacking attack, you may want to add additional security protocols to your cloud account, such as two-factor authentication, where you get a text message alert anytime somebody tries to log in. But it doesn't mean you shouldn't do it. Again, I'm a big advocate of if you drop your device, if you lose it, if it's stolen, and you've got photos on there of your family or your friends and things that are really important to you, what would you rather have? I mean, you can have much higher security, or you can have your photos stored somewhere. So I think for most people, the default's going to be having your photos and your contacts backed up somewhere. The cloud is going to be the easiest way to do it. And you can always back it up manually to a computer as well, but that's just a little harder, and few people are going to do that routinely. And I should also say as well is that while kind of intuitively, giving your information to the cloud seems like it's the less secure way to go. You know, I talk to cybersecurity professionals and experts for a living, and most of them will tell you that these cloud providers are going to be far better at protecting your data than you are. You know, they have round-the-clock security teams. They have network monitoring tools. Like, they're not perfect. They're going to get hacked. You know, nothing is fully 100% secure. However, it's not a terrible option. And in fact, it's one that I recommend, you know, to most consumers, unless, again, you exist in one of these classes of consumers where you might be the individual target of a sophisticated hacker. Next question here. Again, thanks for all the questions coming in. We love getting them. Is what's the best way to get all of my photos and contacts back? Well, again, having one of these services set up, whether it's, you know, Google's Android device manager, again, which is on by default, that won't necessarily get you your photos back on its own. However, having that ability to remotely manage your device is an important first step. But backing up to the cloud, again, you know, there are many ways to do this. I mean, you can back it up to, you know, any cloud provider of your choice. But most network providers, AT&T, Verizon, et cetera, have their own app that just makes it very easy. So in fact, most often that's what I recommend. You can back it up to your Google account as well, you know, or your iCloud account. Apple, of course, makes it very easy. You know, but if you want some variety in terms of, you know, who has your data, that's one way to ensure that Google doesn't have, if you're using an Android phone, all of your data. You know, if you're on an Android device, it's worth noting, again, this is a cybersecurity show, you know, every time you turn on one of those devices, you're pinging Google. I mean, Google is collecting data about everything you do. It's very easy to just back up to Google servers as well. And again, Google is a world-class cybersecurity organization. The question you have to ask yourself is, do I want Google to have every single piece of information about my digital life? For most people, I think that's going to be fine. Some people might want a little variety, so that maybe a couple of different providers don't have everything. But again, if you're an iPhone user, chances are, and you're backing up to the cloud, you know, you're going to be using iCloud. And you know, that is entrusting you know, one company with all of your kind of digital life. And again, on its own, I'm not going to be the type of person to say you shouldn't do that because it's very convenient. It's just a question you have to ask yourself about which provider do you want to have all your data. Next question here is, are there any other tracking apps besides Find My iPhone? There are. You know, again, this is a class of technology called MDM, Mobile Device Management. You can find lots of different apps online for doing this. You know, actually, Lookout Security is a great example. Lookout Security is, you know, a cutting-edge mobile security company. But a lot of people use their app for the Find My Phone feature, you know, which again is baked into a lot of these phones these days. But there are apps like that are security apps that kind of have this double function as a Find My Phone. So there are too many to mention. But if you don't want to use the Find My iPhone feature, if you don't want to back up to Apple's cloud, you know, that's totally fine and understandable. And there are other apps that allow you to do that. My one caveat with that is, you know, and we deal with this a lot with app developers. You know, it's great. We've got a huge, you know, app ecosystem, and anybody can create an app, anybody can get it approved almost, you know, and that's really good for the economy of that ecosystem. However, what you have to remember is if you're entrusting a remote mobile connection to your phone, you know, to an app that, let's say, is untrusted or it's new, you know, you just have to understand that there are potential security implications for that as well. If a hacker were to compromise that technology provider's systems, you know, in some cases, it depends on how they're routing the traffic, but that's a potential security exposure or security vulnerability that could exist. That doesn't mean don't use them. It just means be aware of who you're giving, you know, remote access to your device to. And that's a very important question. And again, when I say that, you know, Android devices have this, you know, Find My Phone feature turned on by default, that's great for most consumers. However, you do have to understand that you are opening, you know, a remote access portal into your phone, which most security professionals would not feel comfortable doing, you know, for a device that has any sensitive information on it. But again, for most people, I would say it's actually a pretty great thing for most consumers. Next question here is what are some warning signs that your data has been compromised after your phone is stolen? Well, if you're talking about is the attacker using or is the thief you know, using your phone, that's going to be very easy to see. You know, obviously, if you haven't called your telecommunications provider, you know, and you haven't shut off the phone, that's the first thing you should do. You know, if you think the phone is gone forever, is call the phone company. At least tell them that the phone has been lost if you don't want to disconnect entirely. But if you think the phone is gone or it's been stolen, just disconnect the phone. That's going to be kind of the first order of business. However, before you do that, if you have any of these tools enabled, Google's or Apple's or whomever, you're going to want to engage with those tools and figure out, what's on the device. The beauty of some of these tools, though, is that in response to this question, many criminals are just dumb. I mean, some criminals are smart, but many criminals are dumb. And we've seen lots of kind of amusing stories where somebody will steal a phone and then use it for personal things. Like they will use it for personal photos. They will use it for personal videos. They'll log into Facebook on your phone and, send videos and messages to other people. So these are not the highest order of criminals here, but you'll be able to see that on your device. Like we've talked to security people, who have seen criminals who've stolen their device using their devices, and they can see that in real time. They'll see photos appear, on the device. They'll see videos appear. It'd be amusing if it isn't such a serious thing, losing that information. But again, you can restrict access. That's the kind of thing that these tools allow you to do if you've enabled them in the case of the iPhone. But in the case of Android, again, these are, many of these features will be available to you by default. So as I say, log in. You can simply log in and see if the criminals are doing anything with your information. But it is worth mentioning that, for as valuable as this data is to us as consumers, personal photos and such, they have almost next to no value to the type of criminal who's going to steal your phone. These are not, again, unless you are a government official or business executive or whomever, who might be the target of a nation-state actor, for whom stealing your device actually carries enormous value. The vast majority of phone losses and thefts occur to criminals who have no interest in your personal data whatsoever. They want to wipe the device and sell it. So I actually wouldn't worry too much about it, but of course it is a deep personal loss when you lose these kinds of this kind of information. Next question here: has iCloud ever been hacked? Well, obviously Apple is a pretty close protector of information, and it's unclear. I would say this. I would say organizations like Apple have attempted hacks all the time. And when you see news stories about services like iCloud being hacked, generally what you're seeing, and there have been some, generally what you're seeing, and there was a case a couple years ago where somebody was able to hack the accounts, the iCloud accounts, of celebrities, and other folks, and the cloud accounts in general of celebrities and other folks, and leak their personal information and personal photos and such online. And what you're seeing there is simple, social engineering. So if somebody hasn't set up the proper protections for their account, such as two-factor authentication, text message alerts, things like that. Anybody who has access to your username and password or can guess your password, can get into those accounts. So it's really important to note, and I think this is a very good question for this reason, is that if you're going to back up your data to the cloud, you've got to make sure that the cloud has the same security that you're applying to your mobile phone, which if you're watching the show and you're asking questions, you're probably interested in. So you've got to make sure that somebody can't just log into your iCloud account, or your cloud account in general, easier than they can get access to your phone. So you've got to have a second layer of protection there for this very reason, because the most likely hack, the hack that you're most likely to experience with a cloud account is one where somebody logs in as you. And it's not some kind of, grand hack of the Apple, server system, or it's not some grand hack of Google. It's a hack of individuals, and they leak information that way. So that's just something you need to be aware of as you're setting up these accounts. Next question here is there a good free cloud service to back up my data that you like? Again, I'm not necessarily in the business of recommending one specific service over another, but in general, and again, some security and privacy folks might disagree with this stance, I think the default option for whatever device you have is just going to be the easiest. And again, these are large technology companies. If you're Apple, Apple spends an inordinate amount of money, on cybersecurity. Google, same thing. Is backing up your photos and your contacts to your Gmail account, is that the worst thing in the world? Again, people will have their personal opinions about whether they want Google or Apple to have all of their information about their personal lives. But however, my default stance is typically, you want to make this stuff easy for people. And, you don't want to give people so many instructions about security, that they can't follow, or that it's too cumbersome, or they just forget about it altogether. So I would say if you've got a phone And anybody who's watched the show before knows that I'm a broken record on this subject. You've got to set up two-factor authentication. You just have to do that so that if somebody finds your phone, they can't get in easily, or they try to hack your phone, they can't get in easily. And the same goes for your mobile accounts. That goes for cloud accounts as well. There is this privacy issue of which company is custodian of your data. Some people like to use, again, if you're a Google, if you've got an Android phone, maybe you don't have Google be your backup. Maybe you have Verizon or AT&T or whomever have their cloud service be your backup. It's a way of just splitting who has your information, and that's a perfectly viable and legitimate path as well. But in general, I think that these big companies spend a ton on security, and they are, target number one for nation-state hackers. So, don't think they don't have their work cut out for them, and don't think that they could never get hacked. But it's always a question of if they get hacked, what could the attackers actually get? And in general, the security around the really sensitive stuff tends to be pretty good, but there are always caveats. We saw Yahoo lost 1 billion users' accounts. Yahoo has 1 billion users. They lost everybody's accounts. So it's, no company is going to be immune from hacks, and cloud services are just as vulnerable. So with that, I want to wrap up. We got some great questions. We always appreciate it. Again, we do this show every week. We want it to be useful, for viewers. And as such, we want you to write us offline as well. Please feel free to tweet to us at Technology. That's the Bloomberg Technology page. Or I'm on Twitter at JordanR1000, Jordan, the letter R, 1000. We'll get to as many questions as possible offline, or potentially in a future episode. We just want to thank all of you for watching. We hope you got something out of it. And again, please feel free to tune in next week. We broadcast live at noon Eastern, every Thursday from the Washington, D.C. Bureau of Bloomberg News. And while you're at it, if you want to visit our webpage, it's bloomberg.com/technology. We've got great technology coverage there, as well as a podcast called Decrypted, as well as a kind of a sister show with my colleague Mark Gurman called Gadgets with Gurman. Again, thank you for watching, and we'll see you next week.